Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out, and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to this forum sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. My name is Bill Crowley. I'm the chair of the Government Affairs Committee for the town of Reading with the Chamber. And first of all, I want to say thank you to RCTV for allowing us to use these beautiful facilities to host this forum. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And I also want to thank Reading Cooperative Bank for contributing to the coffee and the pastries that we have here. The coffee was provided by Anna Folds at the Hut Spot, and the pastries, those wonderful pastries, I brought them in. They're still warm this morning from Sammy Joe's Bakery. So please shop local. Go to our chamber members and our local businesses and spend locally. I felt that it was very important for the chamber, members of the chamber, as well as the residents of the town of Reading, to get involved in this municipal election, which is coming up on March 6th. If you look historically at the Board of Selectmen, those seats do not turn over very frequently. The seat that is coming vacant now has been occupied by the same person for 18 years. It's really important that we as voters, as residents of this town, get out front and meet and know the candidates, because in all likelihood, the person who is going to be elected on March 6th is going to be directing this town for a long time to come. So it's important, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that we have so many people come out on this morning to meet and greet our two candidates. We have Karen Gately Herrick and John Arena here. And I also want to say thank you to you two candidates for stepping up, because most people sit back and they wait and then complain when nothing gets done, or when things get done, they don't like it. And that's another reason why I wanted people to come out now, to get to meet the two candidates, to quiz you, to ask your positions on various topics so that they can be informed when they vote on March 6th. And please go out and vote on March 6th. The first candidate I'd like to introduce this morning is Karen Gately Herrick. Karen and her husband Stephen have resided in Reading for 15 years. They make their home on Dividends Road with their daughter Madeline. Karen is a real estate broker with RE/MAX Heritage, with experience in the residential real estate market for 8 years. Prior to working in real estate, Karen worked for 13 years as a consultant for project management, business development, and process improvement to high-tech Fortune 500 companies such as Accenture, Oracle, Kodak, Sunoco, and Avid Technologies. Karen has been a member of town meeting for 10 years and has served on the Historical Commission for 3 years, Solid Waste Advisory Committee for a term, and the Tax Classification Committee for 1 term. In addition, Karen has volunteered for and contributed to various arts, sports, civic, PTO, and neighborhood groups, including the Wood End School Playground. Karen obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree from Boston College and a master's degree in business administration from Bentley. Karen, please come up.
I think we wanted to defer to Mr. Arena. His last name begins with A.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. So,
Ladies before gentlemen.
Karen had won the coin toss to see who would go first, and like the Patriots, she deferred to receiving in the second half. John Arena and his wife Lynn have lived on Francis Drive for 30 years. There they raised 3 children who all graduated from the Reading Public School System. And they went on to get their degrees from Salem State and Northwestern, and in a few months, his youngest has graduated from Tufts University. Since 2008, John has worked at Raytheon Corporation as a senior manager in program risk management and new business capture. Prior to Raytheon, John worked for many years at Teradyne as a semiconductor senior marketing manager. And from 1989 to 1995, John was involved with his family business, Arena Corporation, which was a contract manufacturer of automotive electronic modules, the black box. So our Lieutenant Governor may have some bad things to say about you. John, John is a current town meeting member and is a member of the Finance Committee. He is also trustee chair at First Parish Wakefield for Budget and Finance. John has been involved with Reading youth sports for more than 16 years. He has held board positions and fundraising roles for Reading Youth Soccer, Reading Youth Wrestling, Reading Youth Baseball, Babe Ruth Baseball, as well as Reading Track Parents, Reading Soccer Parents, and Friends of Reading Wrestling. John earned his Bachelor of Science degree from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and his Master's in Business Administration from Boston University. So, John, the podium is yours. You're welcome to speak for as long as you'd like.
Thank you, Bill. First, let me thank Bill Crowley and Irene Collins for this morning's opportunity. It's not often you get a chance to speak to the business community, and this event took some energy to put together, and again, thank you very much for taking the time and the effort to do so. You've seen my public comments, both in Patch and in the Advocate. You've seen the document and the response to questions that Bill provided, and you've had a chance to kind of, I think, get a thumbnail of who I am. But I thought it'd be useful to restate kind of some of the central themes that I think I'm going to continue to resonate in our campaign. I've chosen to run for this office because I believe ordinary citizens, ordinary men and women, have a duty to be part of our representative government. And we cannot cede that responsibility to professional politicians or to shill candidates, folks that are representing on behalf of another. I've decided to run for this office. No one asked me, and I don't represent any other individual. The words you hear today and the words you've seen in print are mine. The words and the views are written by me for you. I chose to run because, like you, I love this town. As a long-term resident, a homeowner, and a taxpayer, I'm interested in the decisions our town government makes that impact all of our residents. My wife and I have lived in Reading nearly all of our adult lives. You've seen the biography and the work and the life experience in the package Bill provided earlier. And you've heard about some of the government and civic roles that I've held and my wife has helped with. I've been actively involved in my kids' and their friends' education and activities in youth and high school sports. And I've worked with several nonprofit organizations and school and town officials. I know business. I've run a small family business with 40 employees for several years. I understand what it takes to make payroll. I've lied awake at night wondering where business will come from or how do we grow. I know what it means to work 12 hours a day and to have to invest weekends and to put self behind business. I know what it means to wear many hats. I know how hard it can be to keep customers satisfied and how hard it is to find and keep and promote competent help. I also know how hard it is to change organizations. There's a tremendous organizational inertia in any group. I know the life of a small business owner. I've been there. This year's election is particularly important. Camille Anthony served our town for 6 terms over 18 years, and I respect the commitment that that represents. But the challenges we face now are more difficult than those behind us. Last year's good governance won't be good enough next year. We have many challenges ahead. We have a search for a new town manager and the organizational transition that will follow. We have a need to fill our commercial vacancies to help boost our commercial tax penetration. I believe we have a need to introduce a concept of continuous improvement, not merely customer satisfaction, but the processes that lead to satisfaction and continual sharpening of the steel. We need to review how we put our commercial properties to best use, how we're going to cover the additional expense of our post-employment benefits in future budgets. And most importantly, we need to understand how we help our school committee respond to the levels of reported substance abuse and self-abuse in our next generation of citizens. The problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. Those aren't my words, it's Albert Einstein. It takes new leadership and new ideas. So what capabilities will our next selectmen need? In my view, first, strong analytical skills, financial competency, and comfort working complex business problems. Second, an existing familiarity with municipal operations and finances. There is no on-the-job training here. Third, demonstrated success working across diverse groups and individuals with different interests. We have many of them here. Fourth, organizational skills and thought leadership to counter what I described earlier as organizational inertia and the sense of, this is the way we do it here. On March 6th, you'll have that opportunity to elect your next selectman. I hope I've been able to show you, through my responses and my answers today, some of what I hope to bring to Reading. And I hope that you'll support me in that effort. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Bill?
Yeah, John, one of the things that's going to be coming up at town meeting will be the approximately $75,000 funding for RCASA. Do you support RCASA? And so, where will the $75,000 come out of the budget for some other department?
So this year in the budget, the proposed budget for fiscal 13, we have $506,000 in for one-time type surprise events. Part of the RCASA funding is already built into that part of the budget. State aid reported by DeVal Patrick is likely to be up this year. He's forecasting about another $500,000 to the town. We haven't taken that to the bank yet. We've actually built the lower estimate into the budget, but there's some sense that there's relief in the budget, and we've built in provisionally that $500,000, of which I think it's $69,000 in for RCASA for fiscal 13.
Yeah, but these are positions, like I've seen in the past, they come along with a carrot and dangle in front of you, call it a fund. Then when the state fund goes around, we're stuck with the position forever, such as a town planner. That was one of those carrots that we had many years ago, and we're still stuck with a town planner, which in my estimation does not need to exist in this town.
I can't speak to the town planner.
I know.
One of the things, I attended 2 of the 3 RCASA events late last year, and I think like many of us, I was just startled at the self-reported activities that our kids engage in. Now, I don't know that the surveys were absolutely mathematically accurate, but even if you take the results and divide them by half, the results are still scary. RCASA has taken a lead position, and they're able to bridge that gap between the schools and the kids. I've got some thoughts as well about a change here and there I think might be useful for RCASA to make. Ultimately, that falls under the school committee, however. Your question was about funding. I think we've got it covered for fiscal 13. I can't speak to what the state plans to do in terms of funding beyond that, but it's important work, and it fills a gap that, at least at the moment, isn't filled by some other organization. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but we're going around it a few times.
I noticed that, John. The question is, again, where are you going to get the money?
The money is
Off of the $75,000.
the money is additive. It's already been built into the budget. Nothing's been cut to support it. It's already built in for the provisional.
Yeah, but the $75,000 could go to someplace else, like roads and someplace.
There's always a balancing act.
I know.
So, but you're right. And the decision the finance committee has reviewed, and the decision that the town manager and the assistant town manager have made is to fund RCASA to that level in fiscal 13. Other question?
You spoke about better use of commercial property or zoning. What are your thoughts around that?
So I was interested to learn that the town actually owns a fair amount of commercial zoned property. We have, there's apparently some property behind Ash Street. There's the DPW site is commercially zoned. Reading is actually land bound. Most of our property is already built up. We have housing on most of it. What commercial we have is already built. So the opportunities to grow our commercial pie, and we hear this conversation around the split tax. Should we burden businesses with more of the tax load than we do our residents, ends up pitting both sides against the other, and it strikes me as the wrong trade-off. We ought to be on the same side of the table trying to figure out how to make the pie bigger. So when you talk about commercial properties, how do we position ourselves to make best use of those assets? They're on the balance sheet. How do we use them? My thought is find a way to make them available and look at the next medical arts building or look at the next small software startup or some other high value add organization that brings new people into the town from other places to stay here, to spend their money here, to grow their careers here, and in the process help us grow our commercial base from our current 9.3%, that's our commercial, industrial, and personal property assessment level. Help us grow that number to some greater level. What level could it grow to, I don't know, but it's certainly we could do better than we are. So my thoughts are largely how do we make better use out of that asset?
Where would you propose putting the DPW site?
You know, Bill, I haven't thought about that,
Okay, I know.
but it's possible. And if you get everyone focused on the problem and have sitting on the same side of the table, and you stop the pitting folks against each other, I think you get a different answer.
Maybe will work here.
It might, but on the other hand, if you don't do it, you end up with most of the tax burden just shouldered on the residents. So which problem did you want to have? I don't think anyone's really, well, I shouldn't say this, but I don't know that we've made a deep dive into what can really be done with the DPW relocation. I certainly haven't. I haven't seen one that others have done. Other questions?
John, can you just clarify with a little bit more specificity how your roles specifically in the town of Reading, in terms of governance and complexity of issues, qualify you for the position?
It's a good question. I've served on town meeting and also on FinCom. I had a distinct memory when I walked into town meeting for the first time, and I sat down and we were talking, it must have been the April meeting, because we were talking about the budget. And I forget the topic, but somebody flashed one of the articles on the screen, and I stood up and said, well, I'd like to propose we reduce this. And lots of discussion ensued. And I realized what a silly question to ask, John, because by the time you get to town meeting, all the trades have already been done. All the I'll cut this, but you spend that has already been done. So the opportunity to make a change on town meeting floor is very limited. That's why I went for sought a role in the finance committee, because at that point you've actually got an opportunity to move some of the pieces around the board before they get baked in. My time on finance committee has given me the perspective to see how the town is run and how, frankly, how efficient it is. Reading's actually very good at getting 6 cents out of most nickels. And it's remarkable how much we get done with and how frugal we're actually able to be. The struggle's not on the spending side, it's really how we get more revenue in. And I've spent most of my time on finance committee to try to understand that. Most of what I bring to the town has been developed outside of the town or the town. It's been mostly in running my own business, running my parents' business, I should say, and working in senior leadership roles in both the defense and semiconductor industries. And that's kind of the genesis of the notion of continuous improvement. That's really where that concept comes from, is organizations really need to adapt and change. So that's not something I've learned while I've been here at Reading. It's something I'll bring in as an outside kind of best practices.
Another question, John?
I only got 3, Bill.
I'm sorry. I've asked more than that in 44 years.
We don't have that much time.
One of the things that you have brought up at town meeting, Tom, was term limits.
Yes.
Do you intend to stay more than 3 years if elected?
I might stay more than 3. I doubt it'll be more than 6.
Yeah.
I can't say with certainty. If I knew that, I'd
There's a
quit
lot
my
of people
job.
in Washington that said the same thing.
Bill, if I knew what the future would bring, I'd quit my job and go invest in next week's Wall Street Journal. Okay? So just buy the stocks that were going to go up. Nobody knows. But you're asking a deeper question, I think, which is this concept of how long should people stay. I started my conversation today talking about how ordinary citizens should be represented. And that's because most of us come to the office with common sense, raising children, paying bills, trying to get ahead in the world. And those are ordinary skills that provide ordinary common sense as to how business ought to be done and how we ought to govern ourselves. What drives me crazy is how folks that are been in offices forever are so disconnected from the world I live in, and yet they're in charge of making most of the decisions. This year, or I should say last year, I actually supported an article in town meeting put forth what I call consecutive term limits, which would require that non-elected, non-statutory boards in the town would be, members of that group would be obligated every 3 years to step down and let somebody else take the role. They could stay engaged. They could stay part of it, and they could re-enter after they'd sat out a round as a board member again. And what it did is it opened up opportunities for new people to come in and be able to be participative. Today's great leaders in our town got there because they had an opportunity. To the extent you brick up opportunities and committees, you deny the next generation of leaders the ability to come in and be the next athlete that comes in and makes a better historical committee or a better conservation committee. So I do support this concept of shaking it up a bit. You can't have a batting lineup where everyone's batting 1 through 9 and we never change it. You've got to have some rotation in the lineup. And that was the concept behind this consecutive term limits thought that was brought up in our article and unfortunately didn't pass. Questions?
Do you have any thoughts about addressing or changing the culture that I perceive in Reading of it being a little bit more difficult to get things done? You know, I hear that businesses coming in have to jump through 10 hoops versus the 8 that they have to jump through in maybe a surrounding community. I hear from homeowners that, you know, they find Reading difficult. I hear from builders that they find Reading more difficult than surrounding communities. And as somebody who sells real estate in town, this is a very specific challenge for me personally, and it is one of the reasons I've become involved in town government. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Absolutely. One of the things in business that's done constantly is pure evaluation. Where do we stack up relative to our competition? How do they do it? How do we do it? How do we do it better? What can we learn? I've not seen anyone evaluate how we do better, how we do relative to a North Reading or an Andover. Pick the peer city or town that you want, but how do we stack up? And if there's a difference, why is there a difference and what value does it bring to us? And if it doesn't bring any value, why do it? That's this thought about continuous improvement I mentioned earlier. I want to instill in our municipal government this concept of continuous improvement. It's not just a buzzword, it's a culture change. If we're going to make continuous small changes over time that improve our competitive. At the end of the day, we're trying to attract new residents and new businesses. In some ways, it's no different than a business. You're trying to bring people in to buy your product. In our case, it's become residents and pay taxes and be responsible members of our society. So I think it's a cultural shift. It's not a one-year program. It's literally saying we're going to make some changes this year that have follow-on ripple changes through the organization. And it's part of this concept of continuous improvement. Some other companies call it Six Sigma or total quality management. Those are frankly marketing buzzwords, but you literally say we're not going to be as good as we could be unless we focus on the 1 or 2 things that are the most important, which are bringing new people into town, new residents, and bringing new businesses into town. And what are the 5 or 6 things? What are the 3 moves? What are the 10 things we need to do to get that done? Certainly a change of a town manager, which is in the foreseeable future, will also contribute to that as well. That individual that comes in will bring in with their own set of improvements. We're going to be interviewing, looking for folks that have some new ideas. And that may be an opportunity, that particular change may be an opportunity where massive or more significant changes occur, rather than kind of the incremental that I'm speaking about in terms of continuous improvement. But that's the kind of thinking is, don't just focus on getting your job done. How do we get it done with improving our cycle time? How do we get it done in less time? If it takes a month to get a building permitted and surveyed and up and running in Medford, why does it take us 6 months? And what is the 5-month delta by the customer? It's actually costing. He's got to pay the rent on the building. He's got to pay the property taxes on the property. It's all the opportunity cost of not having run it. Why are we putting our potential next commercial additions through that mess? It doesn't make any sense. So it's really that thought of continuous improvement. Anything else? Well, thank you all. I appreciate, again, you coming here. I'd like to thank Bill and Irene for their time this morning, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if they come in our later conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you making your comments very informative. As you can see, there's a lot out there, a lot to be considered. In the near future, change of town manager coming whenever it comes, and our long-term future. So thank you, John. I'd like, now, I've already introduced Karen, but I will reintroduce her. Karen, please come on up. Karen Herrick.
Good morning. I'd also like to thank Bill and Irene and the Chamber for inviting us here today. This has been wonderful. It's been a lot of familiar faces and also had the opportunity to meet some new folks. In fact, my worthy opponent, we haven't had a chance to meet before, so I do thank you. It would be my pleasure to further serve the town of Reading as selectmen. In the past 15 years, I've seen a lot of change in downtown Reading. And it's been positive change, and it's everywhere. And a great example is this very facility that we're in. It was an underutilized commercial property, didn't do much for our streetscape, and now we have an integral part of the community here. So I think we've done an amazing amount of work with the downtown in the last 15 years, and I want this to continue in the future. The rest of the country may still be in an economic slump, but I look around downtown Reading and I look on Haven Street and we're thriving, and I'm proud to call this town home, and I'm proud of the work that the leadership of the town and town meeting members have done since I moved in 15 years ago. Particularly attractive to outsiders, whether they're businesses or residents, are the unique variety of businesses coming in. Something like e-cars coming in on South Main Street is going to add variety and diversity to our commercial base. And we've all seen the large changes with Home Depot and Starbucks and that whole development over there, where before we just had a town dump. So I really think that we, as residents and community members, have done a terrific job of turning Reading around in the last 15 years, despite of the economic ups and downs. And as a small business person and a town meeting member for the past decade, I've been part of this collaborative approach. I understand that there are many stakeholders with valid, important opinions in town. So as selectmen, I would commit to having an open mind and listening to the varied stakeholders and analyzing each challenge that faces us, and then making the decision that benefits Reading now and in the future. So I would commit that to you, if elected selectmen. And overall, the goal is for all of us to ensure that Reading remains a vibrant, active, small-town community which appeals to both the businesses and the residents in town. And it's a wonderful place for us to raise our children in, and a safe place as well. So thank you. That's really all I wanted to say today. But, okay, go ahead, fire away.
Karen will leave it off, not bashful.
No. Wait a minute, I
We
gotta
know
go
that.
You spoke of the downtown. My own estimation, the amount of money that the town spent for the revitalization of Main Street, from Haven Street down to Washington Street, was, I think, $600,000 in that neighborhood. What was the return on investment as far as getting any new tax base, not businesses? Because businesses are nice in the buildings, but until you have a new building to put it in, which increases your tax base, how long do you think we'll get before we'll get that $600,000 back?
Well, it's a good question.
It generally is.
Okay. I'll tell you right off the bat, I did not know that. That's a really good question. Return on investment can be measured a number of ways. That's a really good question. Certainly, increasing our commercial tax base means having our commercial properties in the best shape possible, fully rented, thriving businesses. And that's how we can increase our commercial tax base, aside from creating new buildings, which, as John alluded to, Reading's very built up. So aside from the Walkersbrook Drive area, the downtown, it's a revitalization and a transformation of what we have versus, being able to add to the commercial base. So that I don't have the answer for a specific return on investment. That's a really good question. I just know that when we moved into town, I had my choice of auto parts stores and pizza places, and now my clients, my residential real estate clients tell me, okay, I wanna stay in Reading and find me a location where I can walk to the downtown. Because we didn't have restaurants where you could have a cocktail, and now we do. We've got a variety of restaurants. There are reasons for people to walk downtown aside from, you know, getting a new spark plug for their car. So I know I'm not really answering your question, and we spent a lot of money on those bollards too. I think in the long run, we're gonna be really happy we made this investment.
I'm asking that because I think they're gonna propose the same thing down on Haven Street. And as far as I can see, all the money they're gonna spend, they're only gonna gain one parking spot.
Yeah.
Which is, to my estimation, not a good return on investment,
Parking's
no matter how beautiful it looks.
Okay, yep, no, good question, I haven't seen that. I actually, as a member of town meeting, I did participate in the Smart Growth District analysis and voted for that rezoning. And I did sit in last week and saw some of the design for the parking, and knowing as a business member, I've got a great office down on South Main Street at Remax Heritage, one of the great, I'd rather be out here, but down there, I can say one of our benefits is the fact that we've got a great parking lot, so that our clients can come in and not have to worry about finding a place to park. So you raise a very good consideration that as we're growing, we need to be sensitive to what's gonna keep people coming here. And parking would be one of those items.
I have a question, and it's basically for the both of you to get a sense of your position. The tax shift, that's always a hot topic every year, and it nearly passed this year. I'm concerned about the positions each of you take in understanding where you are on that, and if you're for it or against it. If you're for it, how do you get that message out to the business owners that it's good for them to pay thousands of more dollars in taxes while residents receive a minuscule benefit from that, only to pay it back later on for increased fees and goods and services? The chamber has done big studies on this, and they have all sorts of numbers. And logically, as a resident in town and as a business owner in town, I don't see the logic of where that benefits me to spend all that much more money. It doesn't increase the overall revenue to the town. So why cause all that stress and burden unfairly to one class of people?
Excellent question. And I ask, I don't think we've been introduced, so can you just let me know?
Sure, Michael Giacalone.
And you're a business owner in town?
Yes, I am. I'm a CPA, running my own
Okay, so
practice.
You run your own practice. Do you own your own business here in town, own building? To support your business
I
in
don't
town?
own a commercial building uptown, no.
Okay, so you're a business owner that's renting at the moment, so you may be subject to taxes if it's net, triple net.
One way or another, everybody pays that.
Yep, no, I just want to know exactly where you're coming from, so I appreciate that. Thank you for the question. Let's see, let me get back to, are you going to raise our taxes, if I summarize it? You know, we all take part in this community, so we all derive a very high level of services, which is one of the benefits of Reading, and they need to be paid for. And they need to be done in a way that abides by state law and is equitable and commensurate with the level of services that we get. So I did serve a term on the tax classification committee, not this previous iteration, but the one prior to that. I can tell you at that point, there were some assessments on commercial property owners that were seriously out of whack. They were extremely undervalued. Because commercial properties are a desirable asset in town, people pay good money for renting commercial properties. So that was a problem at that point. And you mentioned that the chamber has studies and surveys showing, however, how taxes impact businesses. I don't know that we actually had that information at that time, so I would say going forward, that would be excellent information to provide to the next tax classification committee. So since then, and 2 years ago I think it is, the state came in and actually told Reading, you are not doing a good job assessing your commercial properties. So they did come in and say the same problem that a lot of us saw on the tax classification committee. And since then, many people have already seen tax increases in their commercial property base. And I'm not one of those Reading people that gets all excited when I open the tax bill and says, great, I just love paying this, we get a tremendous amount of services and I love paying this tax bill. So I can certainly relate to why no one would want to see a huge increase in their taxes. I would say that, to answer your question, my position on a split tax rate, it needs to be commensurate with what's going on in our community at the moment. I would say that when I was on the tax classification, it was very clear that there was an inequity in the way the taxes were being assessed across the commercial and residential tax base. It's not as clear now, and I would, as a selectman, I would again reevaluate based on new data and make a decision that's best for the future of Reading.
I'm not sure that addressed what I was asking.
Okay.
And I know that the data was out there, because I served as president of the chamber when the first big issue of this came to light, and we came across, and we presented all this data to the process. You're talking about assessed values, which is one issue. And I can appreciate if something is under assessed, you bring that up. That's not the question. The question is, do you, in my personal opinion, unfairly burden a business class of people with a higher percentage of a tax, which is different from a reassessed value? So that you'd be shifting the burden of the tax responsibility onto a very small class of payers who don't utilize all these goods and services. So, you know, where I am both in this town, I can speak to both parts. And I don't understand the ideology, if you will, that businesses should pay more simply because they're businesses.
Fair enough.
And that's what I'm asking the two of you, is where do you stand on this? And how do you convince the business community, if you are for a tax shift, how that benefits them and why they should support you for that? Why they should support paying much more that they may never be able to recover? And it's simply money out of their pocket with no return.
Correct, and I am a P&L business person, so I am gonna end up paying the same tax shifts one way or another that you would pay as a business owner, so I can relate to that. You make your decisions, what can I give back to the community, what can I spend on marketing, you know, based on your expenses, and like the rest of you, my expenses go up every year as well. I have to be careful, Mr. Bill Brown is gonna point out that it is the elected Board of Assessors that actually makes determinations and recommendations on the tax shift. So the Board of Selectmen can go along with their recommendation. It is not the role of the Board of Selectmen to specifically on their own make these determinations. So again, I'm just gonna go back to the answer that each year this comes before the Board of Selectmen, and they will present the facts and the data, the recommendation based on lots of thought and analysis. And at that point, the Board of Selectmen as an entire group needs to make a decision on what's best for Reading as a whole.
So you support a shift or don't support a shift?
No, I said I'm gonna analyze the problem as it's presented and make the best decision at that time. I think it would be wrong for someone to stand here today and say to you, I will never do something. I think that shows lack of foresight and lack of willingness to be open-minded and to listen to new data, and I wouldn't make that promise to you. It's a good question.
I read the chamber responses. Oh, I'm
Just to
sorry.
respond, Michael, you didn't intend to.
If that's okay, I was
It's fine.
addressing both the both candidates.
The issue,
Excuse me, John, why don't you, I don't necessarily want to make this a forum for a debate.
Okay, if
We're not
it's
going
inappropriate. you don't have to.
Republican, you know, debates for the presidency. But the question was posed, Michael, to both candidates, so.
If it's
John,
inappropriate to
if you
do
take
that,
just a
that's
few
okay.
moments and,
No problem.
and read the answer, and then we'll bring it back to Karen. Thank you.
our CIP ratio is 9.3. That means 9.3% of the assessed base is commercial, industrial, and personal property. The balance is residential and non-commercial properties. That means within the 9.37 is approximately the commercial fraction. That means, think of it as 100 people, 7 people on one side, 90 on the other. That means for any relief you provide for the 90, it all gets burdened on the 7. If I provide 1 unit for the 90, I've got 12 times that leverage on the backs of the 7. The math doesn't support a great shift. It's not the principle here in Reading, it's the mathematics don't favor it. So it's not an ideology in my book. It's simply, we're not like a Burlington where they've got the substantial commercial and the broad, more equitable distribution between the two. So I'm not ideologically wedded to the position, but in our case, it so disadvantages our commercial property, it actually encourages them to leave, and we're actually trying to bring folks in. Thank you.
I had read the chamber responses that you both had given, and I was just wondering if you could expand on the why you want to be a selectman and what you're going to bring, because it was pretty short in the answers that we gave.
glad you read them, good. Why I'd like to be selectman. As I've been very involved in town government in the last 10 years, and I think we've made tremendous progress in all of our school building projects, surviving during difficult economic times. The finance committee's implemented this 5% cash reserves position, lots of prudent decisions that we've made that we benefit from now where other towns are in dire crisis. As selectmen, I think it's important that we have candidates out there that would agree with the current vision and want to continue it and see it continue. So that's one of the major reasons I decided to run. I also think it's important for residents or voters in general to have a choice. So I think it's great that we have two candidates, and I think Reading should make the choice about their leadership, and that's part of our process in America. So those are I don't see anything terribly wrong with the way we do things today. And I know from speaking to the other folks on the other commissions and committees that I've served on and ones that I've just visited, that we've got a lot of smart people in town and they work really hard. So that's a benefit to all of us. We have a high rate of volunteerism.
And what specific qualities do you feel that you're going to bring to the selectmen?
An open mind, collaboration, and ability to quickly learn, because nobody can go in this position and know all the answers. So to be able to quickly learn, hear both sides, and always with the future of Reading in mind, to be able to make a decision, based on what's good for the community as a whole. Those are the kind of qualities I'd like to see in a candidate for the Board of Selectmen.
Karen, given the economic times, would you support an exclusion for the library and the kiln renovation?
That's an excellent question.
I know.
And, so I sat in on the library board of trustees last night, so hopefully that's even going to be an option for us to discuss, because the state is sending out mixed signals of whether they're going to actually fund the library projects going forward. I'm not a big favor. I'm not a happy person when the tax bill comes and it's gone up significantly, because that's just less money you can spend in other places. So, but it's a fact of life that keeping Reading attractive to businesses and residents means investing in our infrastructure. And as a realtor, and Marianne can speak to this as well, we proudly tell people who are considering moving to Reading, we have A bond ratings, we have done our senior center, our police station's in great shape, we have this beautiful high school with a wonderful media center. Reading spends on the things that are important. So, getting back to your question, schools are very important to our home values, our business values, and the community as a whole. So, we're looking at $4.5 million to bring Killam up to ADA standards and to address some failing building components. And the library, I understand. I learned this last night. The books weigh a lot more than people, and the library was designed as a school building, and it is literally crumbling in places under the weight of the books. I also understand that this new addition to the library could serve as a larger community as a community center, I haven't. I'd like to support it for the community. Again, it's going to mean our taxes go up, all of them. I understand that it might be for the typical homeowner, maybe an average of $150 a year. The good news about embarking on projects now is that the rates are even lower than they were when we were in school, although construction costs have gone up. So I would have a hard time not supporting those overrides if they came before us. And again, the voters will rule. Any kind of tax overrides are going to go to the voters, and we'll make the decision as a community about what we want to do about this. But it is important to keep the schools in good shape. It's important. There are people out there that make decisions about where they want to invest their money and build their lives, based on the library, because they see that as an indicator of, the town overall and where they see the important things.
Karen, just kind of listening to some of the things you've said in the last few minutes, it sounds like you're a fan of where we are and how we've got here. Is it fair to characterize your campaign as you're the candidate of business as we've been conducting it, business as usual going forward? Is that kind of where you're coming from?
No. That's an
Oh, well, then I misunderstood,
Okay,
because I thought
okay.
you said that, you know,
There's always room for improvement, absolutely, there's always room for improvement. I just differ, I don't see that we're suffering from inertia. I see that we are making progress, and being in an environment where we depend on state funds and things take longer than we'd all like. The downtown project took forever, and it wasn't necessarily a perfect execution, but we're light years ahead of where we were before we started. So I think the process by which we get done now, it's pretty good. It could be improved. Again, you know, you and I were talking about the amplified sound issues going on in town. I don't know if you were thrilled with how much voice or whether you were heard. I would hope that the Board of Selectmen does at least listen to people and weigh carefully their opinions. That's how we make the best decisions.
well, you know, something as insignificant as amplified sound to spend 2.5 years getting to a resolution. So
That's
there
good.
seems to be a flaw in that process somewhere.
It takes 10 years to get anything done right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna take us
I'm
a year and a
seeing
half
that.
to get a single building lot ready for sale and approved through the state.
So,
I mean,
so my
you're gonna
question
have
to
to be
you,
patient.
yeah, so my question to you then really is kind of, you know, it is a function of that. It's a function of, I mean, do you feel like the way we get from point A to point B has been good? And if so, fine, then that tells me something about your candidacy. And if not, how would you propose it be different?
Well, one of the things that we have in Reading that other communities don't, or not every other community has, is we have a good working relationship between our volunteer boards, our elected boards, our town manager, our school department. The folks in Andover, the teachers have been out of contract for 2 years. We're all gonna be looking for a new high school principal. And if you were a candidate, you know, would you wanna step into that mess in Andover, which I'm just shocked that they've got themselves into that mess? Or do you wanna think about coming to Reading where we're probably not gonna pay as much, but the teachers are relatively happy, they have a contract, we work together efficiently, we do get things done. So that, my perspective is relative to other communities where there may be fighting between elected town councils or selectmen and town managers. We have a good working relationship and we do get things done.
So I guess, you know, my question really is not about any other community, because I don't live anywhere else. I really don't care what goes on in Andover, honestly. I mean, I do care what goes on in Reading and how we get from point A to point B.
Right.
And, you know, I do like you comment, I love Reading, I love living in this town, and I think it's a great place. I think that there's some problems in process, and so, you know, it concerns me a little. I just wanted to get clear for myself where you stood on that. I mean, if you feel the process is adequate, great. If you don't, so that kind of comes back to my question of,
Right, and you know what, I've been doing this for 10 years. You win some, you lose some, you make some forward progress, sometimes it takes a long time. 2.5 years to get, you know, that particular issue resolved seems like a really long time. I have issues that I'd like to see changed in the town that have taken even longer. One of the most dangerous intersections in town at Franklin and Main, it's a state road. 5 years later, it's still the most dangerous intersection in town. You do what you can do. I mean, so I don't think Reading's perfect. I think we can improve things, and as a community, we'll do the best we can to get this stuff done.
First, I want to say thank you for running, and Joe, thank you for running, because I think it takes a lot of courage. And I just want to ask the same question of you that I asked of John, and specifically, so you've been on the community preservation, historical commission, tax classification, activities in Reading. And with just a little bit more specificity, how were those roles preparing you for the most senior position now on the board stuff?
Yeah, good question. In each of those boards, you get to know the parties involved. You get to know the town manager, the assistant town manager, the thought leaders, the selectmen themselves, because they're generally part of these processes. Got to know our DPW, Mr. Ted McIntyre at the time. you get to see that we hired really smart people in Reading. And those boards and commissions and committees, they're all collaborative work. So that's why it's so important to be able to listen, to work to find a solution. If we're just gonna be yelling at each other and sticking to our viewpoints, then we're not gonna get anything done. So, being part of a board of 5 members means you're gonna have to work for the common good, and you can't just, this is what I want, this is gonna make me happy in my backyard. That's just not gonna work, and it's not gonna be productive, but it'll hold up the process of change in Reading. So it would be really important for the next candidate to be a good listener and have an open mind and be willing to work as a group. Did I answer that? Thank you.
Karen, I think my question would be the same I asked of John. Do you share, well, I won't ask it that way. Do you agree that the culture of Reading is more difficult to get things done?
Yeah.
You know, that theme that we've talked about. Again, it's my biggest concern, not only as a resident, but as a realtor,
Mhm.
that, if I have a piece of raw land, I can't sell it in Reading as well as I can sell it in surrounding communities, because builders that I have relationships with say, Mary Ann, I don't want to deal with Reading. And that is my biggest concern. It's the reason I became involved in town government. Do you have any thoughts as to how, we can shift that?
That's a good question. I share your concern. I've tried to do things in Reading and other towns, so I do actually have a basis for comparison. In some ways, we're easier, in some ways, we're tougher. One of the things that strikes me, and Selectman Bonazzoli brought it up a couple weeks ago, is in Reading, or in Massachusetts, we live in a highly regulated state. I ask myself, do we need to impose all the time extra regulations on top of what the state is already imposed upon us? And I'd look for opportunities, I'd look for opportunities to improve that. It being what it is in the state of Massachusetts, you can't change a faucet without a permit. So if you've done that, you're in violation. So it is a difficult operating environment. And so I guess if I just want to boil it down, I'd want to simplify the regulations that we impose on top of state regulations. I mean, asking our town departments to have a proactive, let's work with developers, let's work with residents, because I'm not sure it's any different for the residents. I hear the complaints from residents as well as businesses that it's really tough to get things done. And part of that's a function of the state that we live in, and part of it's a function of, darn it, I always want to get something done on Friday and we're closed. So that would certainly be an area that we can improve, and I agree with you.
Speaking of additional regulations that go above and beyond what the state has, do you have any thoughts about the Conservation Commission's and the Selectmen's request or attempts to get those regulations minimized? I mean, what the ad hoc committee came back with, which in some opinions was really not much of a reduction of regulation at all. So do you have any thoughts about whether you think that they made good headway with that, there's a long way to go?
I think, thank you for asking that question. I live in the Oxford district, and so I've said this before. I think we can go farther. In fact, on town meeting floor last November, we thought we were being offered a town warrant that, really put us back to the state minimum. And in questioning by town meeting members, it turns out we weren't. So town meeting was able to add value by really getting rid of a couple more limitations that didn't need to be there. There's actually talk about limiting, I'm going to go a little bit off topic, because there is talk about limiting town meeting's ability to change warrant articles on the floor. And I don't, Bill's nodding his head. I don't support that. I think that would be a good area for discussion. But I think town meeting has added a lot of value over time, and it's part of this collaborative process. When you're coming at a topic from the same group of people from one perspective, you miss things. And when it finally gets to town meeting, sometimes they miss blatant, obvious corrections that would improve it overall. So I would certainly want to preserve that for town meeting. So the Conservation Commission, I will tell you, I have personal experience with conservation commissions in other towns. I have personal experience, and I now own waterfront property in Peabody, and there's no water to be found anywhere. So actually, I was like, wow, I thought Reading was tough from the CONSCOM perspective, but no, we're actually quite rational and reasonable, because I picked up the phone and called the state, and they'll be like, yeah, those guys are kind of off the chart. So while I thought Reading was really, really tough, I think there's a method behind the process, and I think there's thought put into it, and I've seen in other communities where things can get really crazy.
And just a side note on that, the Attorney General has ruled that you can't, they had the right to make amendments on the
Oh, good.
law.
Good. Excellent. These have all been terrific questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thanks.
So that wraps up our comments and questions. Thank you again, Karen, John, for stepping up. As someone mentioned, it takes a lot of courage, and it certainly does. This, I thought, was great. It kind of gets the ball rolling to March 6th. There'll be more conversations, I'm sure. I encourage everyone to get in touch with the candidates, talk to them, ask them the tough questions, see what their answers are, and make your decision, make your choice. The choice we make, we will live with for a long time. Thank you all for coming, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Hey there, how you doing?